All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to I realized we got the wrong date on here. My bad. Our August Suburban Advocacy Connect. Today is the 22nd of August. You did not travel back in time. We are happy to have you all here with us. A lot of interest in the topic, our main topic today, so we're gonna not waste too much time and really get right into it. My name is Jim Merrell. I'm the Managing Director of Advocacy at Active Transportation Alliance. Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Sure. Dave Simmons, Executive Director of Ride Illinois. And our contact information is on this slide and also later on.
Yeah, and that's a picture's about 10 years out of date for me. So someone's gotta do something about that. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
quick
Dave.
tool, right, for our organizations. If you're not familiar, Ride Illinois, we're the state's bike advocacy org. We've got our mission is to make Illinois better through biking. You can see some of the goals that we've set as an organization. And then quickly, we were founded in 1992 as a League of Illinois Bicyclists. We are a member-supported grassroots organization. And our website is rideillinois.org. I think Alex and Savannah will be sharing some links throughout this presentation.
And Active Transportation Alliance, we advocate for walking, bicycling, and public transit to create healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities focused on Chicagoland region, but do a lot of statewide policy work. Excited as always to be partnering with our friends at Ride Illinois. Just a kind of quick housekeeping and some ground rules. Please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Share where you're dialing in from. This meeting is being recorded. Use the chat for questions. Like I said, it's a big audience we got today, so we're gonna have to keep things chat. Keep your microphone muted. You don't have that option to unmute today. We will turn off your video if things get crazy. And please be respectful. I know there's a lot, especially with this topic today, there's a lot of strong feelings, which is why we're here to really kind of create a space for us to kind of work through all this together. But please be respectful to presenters and other participants. Just a quick rundown of the agenda. We're doing the introduction right now. I'm going to give a very quick update on the state of play with transit reform and funding legislation and the state topic, and then we're going to dive right into our main topic, which is e-bikes and e-motos, where we're going to kind of frame up the conversation. We have some interactive elements to give folks an opportunity to kind of weigh in and share where they're at. And then Dave, who has really been doing all the heavy lifting. So Dave's going to take over and walk us through some of the things that have been going on recently with micromobility, e-bikes, and e-motos. Talk a little bit about some of the concerns advocacy orgs like us have been raising. Talk about options for effective long-term policy solutions. And then, this is really the beginning of a conversation. So we want to talk about kind of next steps and how we can all stay connected on this topic. We know we're not going to figure this out in a 1-hour webinar. So quick update, as promised, on state transit legislation. If you scan that QR code, that will take you to an opportunity to contact your state legislators in support of state transit reform and funding. We're asking, in addition to having our governance be more responsive, and this is really a statewide issue, so it's not just a Northeastern Illinois thing, but also our other transit agencies around the state are being impacted by this. We're asking for $1.5 billion in new revenue, and it's really critical that we not only kind of prevent our agencies from going off this cliff, but that we fully fund them and give ourselves the transit system that we deserve. So we could really use your help on making sure the General Assembly finishes the work that started in the spring. They're going to be picking this back up in the veto session. People will be the state legislature will be picking this back up. So that's going to start in October. Beginning of October is going to be the next opportunity for this to get over. So if you haven't already, please join us in contacting your state legislators. And thanks, Sarah. I think Alex is dropping the links for all these QR codes into the chat too. So feel free to find those in the chat.
All right, time for the main event. And I want to point out that a couple people have texted and said, "Hey, you've hit capacity." So if you made it, we're glad you're here. If you weren't able to join, as Jim pointed out, we're recording this and we'll share a link afterwards. But excited to see so many folks interested. We do hope to share a bunch of useful information. One of the main goals too is educating the public, introducing a new term that some folks may not have heard, e-motos. It's a rapidly emerging technology, and really to talk about that effective approach for moving forward. We'll touch on concerns, some possible solutions, and also focusing on integrating new mobility modes, safely integrating them into Illinois communities. And pass it back to Jim real quick. We want to take your pulse, not literally, but get it.
So as mentioned, we want to have this be an interactive session. People are seeing a lot of different things. We have a lot of different anecdotal stories about going on. So if you haven't used Mentimeter before, this is a fun interactive way for us to kind of have a conversation with a big group like this. You can scan that QR code or go to menti.com and enter that code. So feel free to go ahead and do that. I'm going to quickly switch over here. And we want to know who is here on the webinar today. So let us know, are you a community member, government staff, elected official, transportation planner, or professional? Or do you defy any kind of categorization? Give folks a couple of minutes to, or not a couple of minutes, it's a couple of seconds to answer that.
So far, no one transcends categorization.
All right. Thanks everyone for chiming in. So we got a good mix of advocates and folks working inside government. So we really hope this can be relevant for all of us kind of working through this together. So this kind of get a grounding in our own kind of personal experience. Have you ridden an e-bike or an e-moto? Never, occasionally? Do you frequently use one? We're just kind of curious to see what people's personal experience has been on this.
A good cross section here. And acknowledge some folks, this may be the first time they're hearing the term e-moto. So part of this purpose of this.
All right. You guys are really good at diving into the Menti. Okay, cool. So a moderate to low level of direct experience with e-bikes or e-motos. This one, we'll see how this goes. In a word, what about e-bikes or e-motos brings you here today? Let's kind of see kind of what's on your mind. If you can add a thought. Safety, confusion, regulations. I feel like that that pretty much sums it up.
Regulation. Yeah.
A lot of concern about
Dumpster
speed,
fire.
the Wild West. This really kind of tracks with what we were expecting to see. Cool. Give folks another couple of seconds, but I think we're all kind of on the same page of how can we ensure that we're creating a safe environment for everyone using our trails and streets. Okay, and then kind of a final for this, we'll have a couple more questions, but we wanted to kind of take a temperature check. So this is like a rating scale. You could slide and say, you strongly agree or disagree. So I want to know if e-bikes or e-motos are a growing concern in my community, and if you believe we need a better policy solutions collectively to help us address this. And it seems like we are having some strong consensus on both of those fronts, which is what we were anticipating as well. Another second. All right, you guys are really good at the Mentimeter. I'm going to switch back here and pass it back to Dave.
Yeah, so I realize this is over lunch. Maybe some of you taking this on your lunch break or other, personal time. So really appreciate your, again, your interest in this. We're going to start our discussion with just the term micromobility and the fact that there are lots of options available. There's increased interest, and it's something that's not going away. So we wanted to frame the conversation initially just to talk about micromobility. And these are those new ways to move about. E-bikes are included in the category of micromobility. These modes are popular across the country because they're inexpensive, environmentally friendly, enjoyable. They can be used for recreation, transportation, everyday trips. And to Jim's point about transit funding earlier, it's possible that if that funding is not found, that more people will be turning to these modes. So there's a lot of overlap here. We also acknowledge that the modes present challenges to planners, municipalities, law enforcement. Some facts that we just wanted to share, and maybe you've been reading about this. Number one, cars are expensive, right? $51,000. That was the latest fact that I could find. That's basically a 20% increase from 2020. And even used cars cost quite a bit. So what we're finding is that folks are looking for these new modes, and that again is we're framing as micromobility. That's the bikes, the scooters, the e-motos. We'll talk about in a moment. My cat may say hello, but they're rapidly proliferating. Right, folks are finding these things and are realizing they could use them to move about. So they are very popular. And the other point to make here is interest in teens getting their driver's licenses, which when I was a teen, that rite of passage, it was just something you did. It's not necessarily something that a lot of teens are doing anymore. So 22%, as you see, don't have plans to get a driver's license. And I believe the statistic is about 30% of the population just don't drive. So there's a good chunk of folks out there that are interested in different ways to get around, including transit. You can see some of the reasons there. Cars are expensive, people are too busy, and then they're finding other ways to get around. So yeah, Jim, you could switch to the next one. Just quickly talk about micromobility. Segways, if you remember segways when they hit kind of back in like the 2001 time frame, they were going to transform the world, right? My dad was one who was like, oh yeah, this is, everyone's going to be around on segways. They didn't quite catch on the way the manufacturer had hoped, but they did whet consumers' appetites for inexpensive, sustainable, practical alternatives to motor vehicles. The second photo there, bike share, we'll highlight Chicago's Divvy program. The first bike share actually launched in 1965 in the Netherlands, which is where a lot of these cool bike-focused ideas come from. And they become very popular really in the past 20 years. The Divvy system in Chicago, the VO system in Urbana-Champaign. And these systems started integrating e-bikes in the last, say, 5-6 years or so. Divvy now has over 1,000 stations, and just last year, 2024, over 11 million trips via scooters and the bikes on their system. That's a 26% increase over the year before. So I think the point we want to make here again is the appetite is there, the interest is there, and again, they're not going away. These things we want to, we'll talk about safe integration, common sense regulations, so on and so forth. Jim, pass it back to you for another Menti poll. Yeah, we want to talk about, oh, Jim, you're muted, or I can take this one.
So this is just one question right now. We just want to get a sense of if people know or understand the difference between e-bikes and e-motos. So thanks for everyone. It seems like we got a pretty savvy crowd here so far. We'll give it another few seconds to for folks to fill this out before we kind of dive into talking about the difference between e-bikes and e-motos. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move this back. Go ahead,
Yeah, so
Dave.
we're going to note, first thing I want to note is that the state of Illinois, this is established law, approved 3 classes of low power electric bikes in 2017, effective in 2018. I think Savannah's going to drop some links into the actual legislation. This guidance was developed with input from advocacy orgs, including People for Bikes, a national org, and currently applies in 48 of the 50 states. So we do have established 3-class systems almost across the country, but we want to dig a little bit deeper and remind or maybe introduce the legal definitions of low-speed electric bikes in the Illinois Vehicle Code. It's worth noting, too, that the maximum power of an electric motor on a legal e-bike is 750 watts. When I first saw the numbers, like, wow, that's a big number. It's the equivalent of 1 horsepower. It's essentially like a lawnmower type engine. So don't conflate watts with, say, like cc's on a motorcycle. But look at the difference between the 3 classes, because there is some nuance there. One of the goals of today's discussion is to clearly distinguish between legal e-bikes and new devices, which are currently being referred to as e-motos. And again, we'll touch on those shortly. I mentioned the bill being signed into law in 2017, but quickly looking at the descriptions here, Class 1 and Class 3 e-bikes are similar in that they're a pedal assist device. The motor only kicks in or is functioning when the rider is pedaling. You'll see between the 2 classes, Class 1 e-bike, the motor stops when the bicycle reaches 20. Class 3, top speed is 28 pedal assisted. And then the Class 2 e-bike still has that 20-mile-an-hour limit of assistance. It's actually, I'm sorry, not assistance, but it also has a throttle. So one doesn't have to pedal on a Class 2 e-bike. So that's kind of the fine line with those 3 classes. And Jim, next slide, will just kind of show a chart that visually explains the difference of legal low-speed electric bikes in Illinois. And then the next slide here. So again, this is established law. It's been established law for, I'm doing my math here, 7, almost 8 years. This is in the statute. It has to have a permanently affixed label that states the class 1, 2, or 3. E-bikes cannot be operated on sidewalks. Class 1, 2, or 3 in state law. They can be allowed on bike paths and bike infrastructure, but a local authority can decide whether or not to allow or which classes to allow. And then to ride a Class 3, one has to be 16 or older because of that additional speed. And then the last bullet point, can't tamper with an e-bike to change the class or to modify the speed. We contend that existing state law for legal classes of e-bikes is sufficient. So when we move on to talking about local ordinances, we're going to remind you of that statement, but there is law already in place. But let's talk about e-motos. So we're going to shift our attention to the newest electric mobility mode, discuss the challenges and the concerns they're raising. A lot of the attention to this new mode, which we're referring to e-motos as negative. There should also be some attention given to the potential benefits, but we want to dig into this topic. Next slide, Jim. So the term e-moto was developed by People for Bikes. And for those who aren't familiar, that's the advocacy organization for the bicycle industry. In the past few years, manufacturers have been churning out devices that don't fall under the legal definition of an e-bike. The first term that was shared within, say, the last couple of years was out-of-class electric vehicle. That term has kind of become passé, but you may see that term used as well. The popular term now that folks are kind of rallying around is e-moto. So as previously mentioned, manufacturers jumped on the public's interest for different ways to move about. The industry is moving much faster than regulation, which is not uncommon. It's kind of led to a perfect storm this summer. It's also led to some knee-jerk reactions by local municipalities across the country. It's not isolated to Illinois. But let's look at the key characteristics. And if you look, I don't know if you can see, these are just some ads that got served up on social media. Top speed 36, 4,700 watt motor, like all these kind of crazy things. All of these things are being advertised as e-bikes. The key characteristics, it's built on a bicycle frame. It looks like a bike. It has an electric motor greater than that 1 horsepower or 750 watts, sometimes up to 4,000 watts or more. And it can go 20 miles an hour or faster, or exceed 20 miles an hour without the user pedaling. So those are 3 key characteristics that pertain to e-motos. It also includes a lot of devices that are marketed to teens, which is really, I would say, the biggest issue we're seeing and the biggest issue we're hearing about. E-motos raise legitimate safety concerns, and we know that folks have had close calls. There have been some incidents reported in the media of crashes involving pedestrians. We sympathize with folks. We know that it's happening. Manufacturers are irresponsibly marketing these things to teens. Parents, if there's parents on this call or grandparents, know what you're buying because they're posing some real safety issues. Yeah, I think in my notes, I say, please, please, please avoid purchasing your devices for your teens that are not legal e-bikes. And again, class 3, you need to be 16 years old or older. So that's kind of the main overview of what's being defined as an e-moto. There's no legal definition yet, which we'll talk about in just a moment. All right, so the problems we're seeing, again, look at that top right, 47 miles an hour. What could possibly go wrong? 1,600 watts on the device below. The public, elected officials, law enforcement, advocacy orgs, as of several months ago, did not understand the difference between e-bikes and e-motos. Essentially, what was happening is any device with electric moto was called an e-bike. As previously mentioned, retailers and manufacturers are absolutely culpable. They're looking to capitalize on interest and line their coffers with funding. If you do a Google search, and actually maybe don't, because all of a sudden that's all you're going to get served up in browsers and on social media. It's insane. It's very eye-opening. But if you do search for an e-bike, I would say the majority of what you're going to find is not actually a legal e-bike in Illinois or the 47 other states. And they're offering deals that are too good to pass up. $9.99, $7.99. You can get this amazing e-bike that goes 47 miles an hour. And it's really, I really want to hammer home this point, with few exceptions, and the exceptions being maybe adaptive bikes or higher end brands. Legal e-bikes are only available in adult sizes. I think that's really important to, as you understand the distinction between these two, that's an important point. And what we're seeing is, as a result of well-meaning but short-sighted ordinances, the use of legal e-bikes is being restricted. So the problems, just some other notes I want to share. High-power electric mobility devices and e-motos are a growing part of the transportation landscape. We need to figure out where they belong. It's being raised at the municipal level. Advocacy orgs are raising it at the state level. It's something that needs to be addressed. Because these things are not regulated, they fall in a gray area within the vehicle code. There's a lot of confusion, and much more needs to be done. And local municipalities, hey, we know you're in a tough spot. Residents are complaining, and you feel compelled to do something and pass local ordinances. We'll talk about that in a little bit, because there is the education piece that's needed. And it's kind of this patchwork, piecemeal approach to local ordinances that is leading to really only adding to the confusion. Next slide, Jim. So yeah, so we're going to talk about this flurry of local ordinances. A lot of folks in Illinois are familiar with the Asian carp, which is in the Illinois River. The concern is if it gets to the Mississippi River, that could lead to all sorts of problems, throughout the country. We see the e-moto or really e-bike ordinances and crackdowns, the Asian carp of micromobility. We really want to contain this to suburban Chicagoland. Now, of course, we've heard from cities downstate, that really across the state, everywhere, that there's concern about this issue. But our goal is, through this webinar and other approaches, to educate and then try to contain this. The local ordinances are well-meaning, no doubt. Public safety is super important, but they're short-sighted and often misinformed. In conversations we've had, many of these ordinances are being developed quickly. The public is not involved. There's not a lot of research involved. It's this, how do we get this is where I shake my fist, the lawless youth off of our streets. So, and the folks making these decisions really don't understand the difference between legal e-bikes and e-motos. And again, that's not conjecture. That's based on conversations, several conversations we've been having. And so what's happening is these ordinances are unnecessarily cracking down on the use of legal e-bikes. So the focus, we use colors to differentiate, should be on e-motos. If you work for a municipality and you're considering an ordinance, which we'll talk about in a moment, focus on e-motos. The legal e-bikes and the state law that's already in place, again, we feel is sufficient. And please, please, please do not use e-bike in the title of your ordinance, only adding to the confusion. There's some screenshots there. A now infamous photo from Elk Grove Village, where I live, where e-bikes take over the road. That was all the media reports. Looking at that photo, with about 95% certainty, we can say none of those are e-bikes. None of those are legal e-bikes. Park Ridge recently passed an ordinance, again, e-bikes, where the focus should be e-motos. And then I won't even get into the Village of Evergreen Park, which is, well, maybe I will. Essentially says you can't ride on any road, you can't ride on nor cross any road with a speed limit greater than 25 miles an hour on an e-bike. So essentially, ride around the block. So you can see how these are a bit problematic. Next slide, Jim. The inconsistency is really, it's really the biggest, well, probably one of the biggest problems, if not number one, number two. Adjacent communities have widely varying rules, whether it's age restrictions as to who can use even a legal e-bike, helmet requirements. Listen, we're Active Trans, Ride Illinois, a lot of advocates on this call. We strongly recommend helmets. We're not saying helmets are frivolous and shouldn't be worn, but they shouldn't be a requirement. Imagine if, from the perspective of motorcycles, if there were local ordinances that required motorcycle drivers to wear a helmet in this community and not in this community, and again in this community, there would be chaos, there would be upheaval. The same should apply to bicyclists and folks riding e-devices. Driver's license requirements, insurance requirements, threats of taking children into police custody. We're not making this stuff up. And then that last bullet point, oh, actually, I misspoke. The Evergreen Park ordinance, it's a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is basically all the arterial roads. So imagine if a 15-year-old has access to a legal e-bike, maybe wants to use it to get to school, to work, which was a real example in the media, but simply can't do so now because the rules are vastly different. They don't know a lot of people don't know the boundaries between communities. It's not always obvious. And this individual was taking a chance of being pulled over by police and taken into police custody. This inconsistency of ordinances is really adding to the problem, which is why, again, with legal e-bikes, we feel the state law that's in place is sufficient. Jim, next slide, please. So we're going to raise some concerns. We need a more coordinated regional or I would say regional and state level policy response that clearly identifies the problem. It creates a more effective and consistency policy interventions without diminishing access to legal e-bikes. That's our main concern, right? Our organizations, we're a bicycle advocacy organization, including legal e-bikes, active trans, bikes, e-bikes, transit, walking. That's one of our main concerns, is really restricting access to the legal e-bikes. So we want to distinguish between, clearly distinguish between e-bikes and e-motos. Passing it back to Jim for another quick poll.
All right, so we want to hear from you. Does your community have or is considering a policy limiting access to e-bikes or e-motos? We want to hear what you're seeing out there. As Dave was saying, it's been like a game of whack-a-mole, trying to keep up with all this policy making, a flurry of policy making.
Yeah.
Would that we, could bring the same energy to speeding cars, but that's a different webinar.
Or yeah, I mean, even the rules for car, like, drive on the left side in this community, on the right side in that community. Like there's some blinders that are put on. Again, well-meaning, but very like short-sighted.
All right, so it sounds like a lot of people
A lot
are
of folks do.
are seeing, or considering having this happen. So
Curious if maybe folks can just quickly toss in the chat. Were you aware of the development of these policies? Were you invited to conversations? Just kind of an aside. All right, whenever you're ready for the next one. Okay, so here are some things that we're seeing as the negative impacts of these widely varying municipal ordinances. We mentioned limiting access, right? Folks that have or and are using legal e-bikes. A lot of times we're talking that, say 14 to 18-year-old, the human beings who are, physically large enough to ride these things. That's going to certainly be part of it, but also, folks who from the adaptive bike community, folks who don't who can't drive, that's a concern. They should have other ways to get around. Again, focus on e-motos. We can't say unequivocally that this is the case, but likely that these bans and over restrictive ordinances will lead to more trips by car. Use the example of the teen who maybe could use something to get to school, a friend's house, sports practice, or whatnot. And all of a sudden it's, hey, mom, hey, dad, can you drive me? The statistic from National Safety Council, 99.9% of deaths and serious injuries on really it's the nation's roads are cars and trucks. So, appreciate the attention to safety when it comes to these other modes, but the real focus, the real concern, the real cause of death and serious injury is motor vehicles. So what are we doing to increase focus on that? And then the retailers, there's culpability. The fact that they're selling these as e-bikes just to get folks, to get their money. We really need to rein in the market. And I now realize rein on this slide is spelled wrong. Learned something new today. Next slide, Jim, we're going to talk about some short-term solutions for municipalities. Our recommendation currently is if there is a ordinance being discussed, being developed, if there have been drafts that have been passed to city council, delay or stop the vote. Work with advocacy orgs, work with other municipalities and elected officials on a long-term solution. The patchwork of ordinances is really confusing the public. And we contend it doesn't really address the root cause. So that would be our first recommendation is kind of slow your roll and take a breath. The focus on e-motos again, let's call it what they are. Let's not use these as e-bike ordinances. And then if we're sharing information about the existing state laws regarding legal e-bikes, that would be a suitable next step. Essentially say, in our community, legal classes of e-bikes are allowed, maybe roads, if you have trails or side paths, that makes sense. And a suggestion was maybe local businesses, a chamber of commerce, whatever you might have in your community can help get that information out to the public and amplify that message. So that would be our recommendation for short-term solutions. And we're kind of talking, say, now till the end of the year. Listen, the weather's going to be, temperature's going to be dropping, kids are going back to school. The main complaint of, again, the lawless youth is going to be less of a concern in the coming months. Let's focus on a long-term solution, which we'll get to in just a moment with some suggestions. And then the next slide, so with assistance from the planners and professionals on Ride Illinois' board, we developed what we see as a broad, useful guidance for municipalities. Scan the QR code or go to our website and you'll find that. We know it's getting use because we've been hearing from municipalities. The goal of this is to assist communities, to give you a solid starting point for discussions about integrating these new modes into your community. we state the problem. We give definitions of the devices. We have this colorful where to ride and roll graphic, which has gotten lots of attention. And there's been several media appearances in the last month or so. And then at the end, there's a bunch of links and resources that can be used to educate. And if you feel so the need to develop an ordinance, you can use those to develop a common sense ordinance. The green check marks and the red X's align with state law. So in discussions, focus on the yellow question marks. If you're a rural community, maybe you'll allow a class 2 or a class 3 e-bike on a trail. If you're an urban community, those, the class 3 that goes a little bit faster, maybe you don't want that on your infrastructure. That's where we feel the conversation should focus when it comes to seeking solutions. So let's talk about solutions. Many of the attendees on today's webinar are seeking solutions for their community. So we want to talk about effective, suggested long-term solutions. And these aren't just kind of pulled out of the air. These are come from conversations with partners within other states at the national level. Solutions are going to require support and input from a wide range of stakeholders. Again, elected officials, municipal staff, planners, engineers, law enforcement, advocates. Next slide, Jim. When we mentioned kind of the cool your jets, take a breath suggestion, what we would like to focus on with your assistance is passing legislation in the spring 2026 legislative session to legally define in the vehicle code an e-moto. We think this is a very first step, significant step. That may look like establishing a new term. E-moto is now in the vehicle code. It may also be expanding an existing term. Some states have expanded their definition of moped to include electric motor devices. That's where a lot of these e-motos fall. And then there likely would be driver's license and insurance requirements, just like for a moped. It's a class L or a class M driver's license. We hear a lot, it kind of conflated to e-bikes, like, oh, they should be licensed and registered. Well, e-motos, yes, legal classes of e-bikes, we don't agree with that. Laws that were passed in other states, and we listed 4 of them here. We had a conversation with People for Bikes the other day, and they offered these suggestions: California, Minnesota, Oregon, Utah. Other states are looking into it. We can learn from what they've done, and we could apply that to Illinois. For example, California didn't establish a new definition for e-moto. What they chose to do was say, here is the legal definition of a low-speed electric bicycle. Anything beyond that is not. It can't be advertised, sold, offered for sale, or labeled as an electric bicycle. Utah took a similar approach in that they were the first in the nation to require labeling by retailers, essentially saying, this is not a legal e-bike. Here's the definition of a legal e-bike. This is not. And again, they can't sell these things as e-bikes. So we ask you for your support. There'll be a way to get involved as we wrap up here. And then I think it's worth noting the municipalities that were quick to adopt ordinances, it would be prudent to then revise your ordinance based on the passage of state law, which again, our hope is in the spring 2026 session to again clearly differentiate between e-bikes and e-motos. Next slide, Jim. Number 2 here, again, proposed solution is we got to rein in the retailers. The screenshot, which I realize is small, I just searched for e-bikes for teens and motors up to 3,000 watts. They talk, it's almost like, advertising a car. You can go, 0 to whatever. Here's the top speed. All these things that, people see and are like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then they end up buying them. But given the kind of the situation in DC right now, we don't see there being more regulation from the federal government. The recommendation that we've been given through conversation is that we really focus on a state level solution that can be most effective in the near term, and that perhaps federal solutions down the road that rein in the retailers that are, misleading the public and, profiting off of people's interest in these devices. Again, we would love to, as California did, restrict any labeling as an illegal e-bike, any e-motor from being advertised and sold and offered as a legal e-bike. There needs to be that clear distinction because the point of purchase is so critical here. Consumers need to be educated. They're not doing things. Most consumers are just seeing a good deal. They're seeing a good deal. They're seeing something that maybe looks cool. Maybe a friend has it. Maybe if, for parents, their teens' friends have it. They're not educated. Most are not educated when they're making that purchase. And there should be repercussions. This is going back to the Utah law for retailers and manufacturers that don't comply. You can't sell your device in the state of Illinois because as you can imagine, a lot of these manufacturers are online retailers. So you can't sell your device in the state of Illinois if you don't comply with these regulations. So that's number two. We need to somehow, and I know it's a very daunting thought, but we need to rein in the retailers and manufacturers that are preying on the public. And then last one here we're suggesting is we need better bike walk education in Illinois schools. And I say that because some of the conversations that are had lead to, oh, these kids don't know the rules of the road, or boy, they don't, the kids don't know how to, bike and walk. Why are we putting them on electric devices? What if students were given education in schools, including education about electric devices, and are encouraged to walk, bike, even low speed scooter to school? I passed a pickup line yesterday, not far from here. It was insane. So how do we educate the kids, empower the kids, strengthen the bill that was passed in 2018, which says every public school maintaining any grades kindergarten through 8 there shall be instruction, study, and discussion of effective modes for the prevention and avoidance of traffic injuries related to walking and biking. We're pretty certain that that's the minority of schools right now. Right, Illinois, we have our bike safety quiz mini grant program. We know we reach 70,000 students each year. That's the tip of the iceberg. When the bill was passed, there was celebration. But the reality is the law isn't sufficient in its current state and has not resulted in meaningful bike walk education. And it's not just about biking and walking to and from school. It's about safely navigating their community on foot and by bike. So there is content out there. We've been in discussion with the State Board of Education. We'd love to leverage the content and resources from the state of Minnesota. Perhaps we can get a bill introduced this year. This could lead to generational behavior change. This is not immediate solution. This is about the next generation and how they are taught and how they choose to move about their communities. And I think I mentioned earlier, but we feel like an e-device module or chapter or whatever has to be part of this. Kids are smart. Let's teach them these things and not wait for them to find out the hard way. Let's move on to some next steps here. So where do we go? We'll share a few ways individuals, orgs, municipalities, law enforcement, elected officials, and so on can focus on long-term solutions, public safety, and common sense integration of these new mobility modes. We want you to be part of the solution. There's a QR code there with kind of a funky arrow pointing to it. The gauging interest in developing a working group to engage in more deliberate and constructive policy development. The solutions to today's topic will likely differ between urban, suburban, rural communities, as well as trails, forest preserve districts or other entities that own and maintain trails. We're not saying there's a one-size-fits-all solution, so that's an important distinction. If there are meetings in your town, which again, unfortunately, we've not heard that folks are being invited, go to that meeting. Share resources, and I think Savannah's going to drop in a link for just a one-sheet kind of overview that you can use. Educate the elected officials and the folks who are making these decisions, and then let us know. We've been getting probably 3 or 4 emails a day. Here's this community's ordinance. Here's this community's ordinance. They're all over the board. So keep us in the loop, because we can't just naturally land on those. And then talk to your state elected officials, especially if, our initial goal is going to be finding a sponsor, ideally in the House and the Senate, who would want to take this issue up. We'll be sending, right, Illinois, Active Trans, there'll be action alerts. There's going to be witness slip requests. We want you to chime in to support a long-term solution. The details will be sorted out, but the goal is the long-term solution. And then, collaborate with us. Both of our orgs have been around for quite some time. I think it's Active Trans 40th anniversary, right? Collaborate with us. We're here, to do good work and to support folks in their communities and across the state. If you happen to have, if your finances allow, hey, we'd love for you to donate or become a member as well. That's the only commercial and sales pitch we'll share right now. And then I think we shift on to some final thoughts here. Final thoughts. And we're going to look at some of the questions that are in the chat. So if you have questions now, please enter them in the chat.
Yeah, a lot of good thoughts and reflections coming up in the chat. So keep it coming. If we don't get to it today, we can feed it into the ongoing conversation. We got one more Mentimeter. We want to understand if our webinar today is helping you build your understanding.
Okay, that's a good sign. It was like 1.2. Like, oh, kind of deflated.
Dave, it's also this shout out to Dave again for he's been living and breathing this stuff. I know the last couple of months and doing all the heavy lifting and research and stuff, and it's been great. Appreciate your leadership, Dave.
No, absolutely. I think it's such an important topic. Happy that Active Trans is, and a thumbs up from Vicky.
No, you're greater.
Right. All right. So let's quickly summarize here. So these are the main bullet points, right? Hopefully this was conveyed during this discussion, but briefly review e-bikes, e-motos, micromobility, whatever's next. They're not going away. And a common sense approach to integrating these into communities is a good long-term goal. It's something that will benefit the communities. The last bullet point that we have there, right? The municipalities that thoughtfully integrate these modes, that's, young people. We mentioned the driver's license statistic, the price of motor vehicles. The next generations are going to want to live in communities where they can get around in a variety of ways, and they're going to want to live, work, and play in those communities. So that's an incentive for the future. And your incentive now, if you're involved in local government, is by making these things possible to use in your communities, you're really helping reduce the transportation, the cost of transportation for your residents. It's a benefit to your residents. Safely integrating, common sense, that's a term, but if folks can get around different ways and not have to own a car, own a second car, that's, again, places people are going to want to be. So let's distinguish between, let's not conflate the term, everything with an electric motor to an e-bike. This is going to be critical for, adoption, law, enforcement as well. And then this is tip of the iceberg type of efforts as far as the public, the poor public. They're so confused. And these ordinances, again, every day we're learning about more and more. They're only adding to the confusion. We understand what the goal is. They're well-meaning, but they're only adding to the confusion in the public. So we mentioned integrating modes as well. Those are kind of the main bullet points we wanted to leave with you today. I think we just have one more slide here, again, with our contact information. Savannah and Alex have been monitoring the chat. Also, quick plug for our website. So rideillinois.org, real easy to remember, activetrans.org. And then our contact information is there as well. Jim, anything you would want to add before we turn it over to Alex and Savannah for maybe some of the questions they're seeing in the chat?
No, just I'll drop the link to that form where the QR code goes one more time. So you can just click on that and let us know. This is just the beginning of the conversation, as Dave said. So, we're trying to organize around this. So please fill out, express your interest. We'll also have a spot in there if you have other questions or comments that we didn't get to today. Drop them in there. We can kind of add them to the list of things that we're exploring and trying to gain understanding. So
Alex and Savannah, is there anything we can attempt to answer here?
One question we got from Dawn that we might not have the answer to now, but it is a good point, is with the new vehicle code that adds that changed the definition of a bike for low speed e-bikes. So now low speed e-bikes are bicycles. Bicycles are allowed on sidewalks, but state law says e-bikes are not allowed on sidewalks. So is there a clarification there, or is that something we need to work on next legislative session?
No, the existing law regarding e-bikes is that they're not class 1, 2, or 3 cannot be used on sidewalks. So I don't know that there's a necessarily a next step there. I mean, bicycles are different. City of Chicago, you can't ride on the sidewalk. I think there's a few other municipalities, but for the most part, it's safe to ride on, or one can ride a bike on a pedal bike on the sidewalk if they encounter a pedestrian. Pedestrians have the right of way. So I think that answers the question.
I see another question for you, Dave, from Sarah. Can you address e-scooters and the legal age under Illinois code being 18?
Yeah, I will admit, and Jim, I don't know if you have any context here. Like e-scooters were not necessarily on Ride Illinois radar, and really doesn't fall directly in our mission, kind of that, so it's stay in your lane type of thing. So that law was passed last year. We looked at the sponsors of that bill, some of whom have been very friendly towards, micromobility and e-bikes and that. I feel like that law, it originated with concerns in Chicago. Those are a lot of the co-sponsors. It definitely flew under our radar because there are low-speed scooters that go, capped at 10 miles an hour. Those don't seem like a risk. So yeah, it's in a way, maybe we, as advocates, or we just missed that. I don't know. Jim, was that a discussion with Active Trans last year?
I'm sorry, I've been
yeah,
mucking around on the back end here.
Yeah.
Can you restate the question?
Alex, you want to restate it? Or I can.
Trying to look for it on the chat.
Well, it was about the law that passed last year requiring or restricting the use of e-scooters to 18 and up.
Yeah, we didn't work on that. One thing I will say though is there is now that kind of these e-scooters have been around for a while, we're starting to get some actual research coming out. Like we talked about, there's a couple of questions about this too. So people are like, what are the stats on safety for e-bikes or e-motos or scooters? And because they're not registered vehicles, unless a car is involved in the crash, there's not going to be a crash report generated. And so we have to rely on other things. And Vicki Barrett, who's a superstar from our regional planning organization here in Northeastern Illinois, and like helped me kind of understand this the other day. She shared with Dave and I, saying that you can look at things like emergency room data to try and glean this, but actually there was just like the first like meta-analysis posted on e-scooter safety, which was not good in terms of the safety profile of e-scooters. It's showing compared to conventional bikes kind of a risk ratio like 3.5 times more risk involved, and a lot of head injuries happening on scooters, right? So this is, I think, like we're all trying to learn about how do we keep people safe going forward. But I think the lack of data is one of the biggest problems that we're facing right now, right? So all we really have is kind of the anecdotal stuff. And if we have some ambitious researchers who can go and look at the emergency room data, we can get a little bit more information. But I think this is going to be one of the things we're going to have to grapple with, going forward as we kind of try and move forward together.
And media reports, right? I mean, media is quick
Right.
to jump on when something relatively rare happens, right? And that just kind of gets it into the public's consciousness and can blow things out of proportion. But yeah, we understand and acknowledge that there are safety issues with these modes. Probably not to the level that might be the result after, say, a media report or a very serious crash.
And to keep it 100, like obviously, you can get a driver's license when you're 16 years old and drive a car, and that is the vast majority of carnage on our roadways is caused by people behind the wheels of motor vehicles. So in the grand scheme of things, that's still the #1 safety issue on our streets. And so we don't want to see, any of these new electric devices kind of fall in the footsteps of like our dangerous addiction to cars.
I only got time for a couple more if you want to lob them out there. Or any themes coming up, say in the comments. I'd be very curious to read through the comments. I'm sure you all offered really great insight.
Yeah, this has been really rich. I appreciate everyone's participation. But I think we can maybe wrap up.
Yeah. And I think, one of the points you made as we did our last session this morning to go through the slides, as some point Jim made, is, we want to continue this conversation. So, take the opportunity to reach out. We're both, we're small orgs. You can only do so much, but we'll do our best to assist or share resources. But yeah, this is just.
And we're already hearing, interest from some of our regional agencies in taking this on and helping to convene. What we know is we need to have a collective response, right? This piecemeal approach just isn't going to keep people safe or be effective. So we are going to keep going. So fill out that form, let us know. We'll let you know as things move forward. And the people are asking about the recording. It will definitely be sent out to everyone who has attended, but you can also find it on our website where Alex has dropped the Advocacy Connect. So Ride Illinois Active Trans, we do these webinars every other month. So we'll be back in October with another edition, maybe with an update on this very topic. But next month, we'll also have our City Advocacy Connect, so stay tuned for that. There's a lot going on with transit and everything else. We will post and send out the recording, and any feedback, please reach out to Dave or I or Alex or Savannah. And we appreciate everyone taking the time to be here today, and we will see you all soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.